I can update. I retired in December of 24, and I had 48 years, and I loved every minute of it. Never had a time when I thought, what am I doing here? I always loved it. And I loved the teachers that were there. And it's my privilege this morning to get to speak on one that was a mentor to me. And he's the one that got me into the Restoration Movement. I'd never heard of the Restoration Movement till I met Brother Basil Overton. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, well, you take the class and you'll understand what it is. And so I've loved it ever since. I tell people that I've probably been in more cemeteries than a funeral director. And my wife can testify to that because I've drug her through weeds and vines and everywhere to get to cemeteries trying to find the graves of old pioneer preachers and pioneer Christians. But it's my privilege this morning to speak on the life and work of Basil Overton. Brother Overton, as I said, he was a mentor to me. He was more like a father sometimes because he would, if I were speaking and I didn't use proper grammar, he had a way of calling me aside, and he said, that was really a good lesson, but you need to think about that word, and that's about all he would say. And so I'd have to go and find out then, how do I use this word correctly? But he was a very gentle person with folks. He had the qualifications. He could go out and talk to the most highly respected college professor in the whole world and make him feel comfortable when Brother Overton was talking with him. But he also could go out in the field and stick a straw in his mouth and chew on it and talk to a farmer and make him feel just as comfortable. And I always admired that in Brother Overton because he had the ability to get on anybody's level. And one of the things he would say to us, he always called us boys. Now, we've had a few of our darker brethren, before they learned him, they got offended by that. But Brother Overton meant no harm. We were just his boys. And like Larimore had boys. And Brother Overton would say, boys, you need to shell the corn so the cows and the calves can eat it. Other words, when you preach to where the older and the younger can understand it. Make it simple. And he lived by that. And he was a very popular speaker. I don't know if he even knew how many gospel meetings he held from the time he began preaching until he passed away. Okay, Basil Abney Overton, that was his full name. And he would laugh about the Abney because his mother, or his grandmother rather, had been an Abney. And some of you that have studied history, you know that there was a famous author by the name of Merle Daubeny. And this Abney came from that name. It's just a shorter form. And so Brother Overton liked to refer back to Daubeny. Okay, he was born near Greenville, Tennessee on December the 3rd, 1925, to Raymond and Mary Abney. Oh, well, so she was an Abney. I was thinking it was his grandmother. He was 18 years old in 44, working on a farm when the war he got his call. The war had already been going on, as you know, but he got his call, and he chose the Navy. He served in the Navy. He said he estimated that he had traveled over 35,000 miles on the sea during that time, and he saw some of the major battles from a battleship, as such as, I think he was there near Corregidor and maybe Iwo Jima and some of those places down toward the end of the war. So that made an impact on him. Now, this thing sometimes jumps too far, and I'll have to go back. In 1945, he married Miss Margie, and I don't ever remember him referring to her in any way except my Margie. It was always my Margie. And they worked together in the mission field, and Sister Margie was a good teacher, and a lot of the young women would learn from Sister Margie how to be a wife. And so he was discharged from the Navy in February 46, and after the war ended, their first child, Timothy, was born. Now, Timothy passed away when Brother Overton had been there. I guess only Brother Baker may remember, because he was in that area. Brother Overton had only been there a year or two, I believe, when his son Timothy passed away with a heart disease. And so that made an impact on Brother Overton. Timothy was going to school. He was actually enrolled in school at Freed-Hardeman and wanted to be a preacher. And so Brother Overton was very proud of him, because Tim was going to follow in his steps. But he died very young, and so that was a tragedy in Brother Overton's life. Okay, Brother Overton attended Freed-Hardeman for 3 years. I think back then it was considered a 2-year college or something, but he stayed and took other classes just to be exposed to a lot of different classes. And so he stayed 3 years, but he graduated, and then he attended Abilene Christian College for 2 semesters, and he received his BA from Eastern Kentucky University and then an MA from the University of Kentucky. Some of you may remember that the University of Kentucky started out in Georgetown, Kentucky, as Bacon College. It was a brotherhood school, and it remained that even after it moved to Lexington, until a fellow by the name of Bowman became president, and he basically gave the school to the state, and it became a state school then, instead of being controlled by our brethren. And that's what caused Brother J.W. McGarvey, Brother Charles Lewis Lowes, and Brother I.B. Grubbs to form the College of the Bible. And for a long time, they taught it in the basement. I think it was the Central Church there in Lexington. And then they finally got their own building. And that school continued training even after the rupture between those who claimed to be disciples of Christ and the churches of Christ. And of course, you know, they introduced the instrument and had a missionary society and other things that were not authorized in the scriptures. And so they finally took the school over, and it ceased as an entity. They still have classes, but they don't even own a building anymore. It's all done through Zoom and things like that. Okay, but that was where Brother Overton was trained at those 2 things in Lexington, Kentucky. Brother Overton always said, and I've heard him say this, that the best education he ever got, though, was on the farm. And he's like that old saying, you know, that was always said, you can get the boy out of the country, but you can't get the country out of the boy. And they never succeeded in getting the country out of Brother Overton. Even living there at Florence, he would grow a lot of his own vegetables, but he would also go and buy wheat from some of the wheat farmers, and he had a little stone ground mill that he would run with, I don't know if it was electric or gasoline powered, but he'd grind his own flour sometimes in his own mill. That's how country Brother Overton was. And so that just made all of us love him that much more. He began preaching in 48, and as I said, he preached up until a couple of years. I would say probably around 2010 was the last time that Brother Overton preached, because he became very ill, and of course Margie died in 2010, and then Brother Overton died in 2013. and so we lost our treasures there. And along with Brother Charles Cole, who founded the school as International Bible College, he had passed away some years before. Okay, let's move on here. He did preach in mission work. He preached for, I believe I put there 48 years of ministry that he did in preaching and mission work. He started the Southside congregation in Lexington, Kentucky in 1860, and he only had 10 or 12 people in the congregation. He worked there with them 9 years, and when he left the congregation that he had begun 9 years before with 10 or 12 people, now numbered over 400. And so that was the kind of person that Brother Overton was. He wrote several books, not large books, but I suppose the thickest one he wrote was 7 short sermons. And it was, as you go through, guys would use that. Our students would take that and go out and develop a sermon from those little short sermons Brother Overton put in it. He also, he loved Christian evidences. And so he wrote a book on creation or evolution. And then he wrote one on what happened to the body. And that was one of the best discussions about the body of Christ between crucifixion and resurrection that I've ever seen. And it's a little short booklet. It's probably not more than 60 or 70 pages in length, but it's a treasure to have. So, and plus, he did a lot of writing for Gospel Advocate, and then he was made associate editor. And this paper here, this is 1965, no, that's 68. He became associate editor of the Gospel Advocate. And he was still doing that when Brother Charles Cole and some other men from the school that was about to start had gone to Nashville and persuaded him to come to Florence. Okay, it was 68, not 65. And so Brother Charles Cole and Alan Brown and some others went to Nashville and persuaded, this was in November 71, to get Brother Overton to come. And the purpose, they wanted him to teach for sure, but they wanted him to start a gospel paper. And that's what this study mainly is about this morning, is the paper that Brother Overton started, the World Evangelist. Now, there's a lot of people today, since the paper has not been published for several years now, but there's a lot of people don't realize how much impact that paper had. In I believe it was 94 or 95, I was still driving back and forth from Florence, Alabama to Torreon, Mexico, and I was teaching a class for a week. They wanted me to come down and teach some subject, sort of a shortened version of what I was teaching at school. And I was working with Brother Gabino Rico as my translator, and we would usually, on the way back to, well, after I did the school, then he would take me down through Zacatecas, or down to Zacatecas, and then north from there back to Monterey. And then I would drive on across the border there in Nuevo Laredo and Laredo, Texas. So on I guess the first trip I went to Zacatecas, it was on up in the night. And I remember us stopping on a little hill and getting out, and miles and miles there was nothing. But in those distant miles you could see a little village and the lights. Even though we were that far away, it was clear and dark. But looking up at the sky, the Milky Way, I've never seen the Milky Way as I saw it that night. No light disturbing from a city But under that canopy of darkness, there was a little village that sat on a hill, and it was only about a half a mile off the road, but it took us nearly a half hour to get to it because of going down into little washed out arroyos and ditches and curving this way and that. You couldn't drive over 10 miles an hour because, there's up one and down the other. And there was a little village called Ojo de Agua. And the preacher there had just finished a gospel meeting for a congregation in Torreon. We were taking him home. His name was Bull Mara. And we got there, and Bull Mara couldn't wait for us to get to his house. He wanted to show me and Brenda's brother Milton Cheney his treasure. And when we got there, he brought out a stack of World Evangelists that high. That was his treasure. I got back to Florence, and I told Brother Overton, I said, Brother Overton, you'll never guess where I saw a big stack of World Evangelists. And I said, it was in a village that was off of the main road through the rough terrain. It'd take you 30 minutes to drive it, and probably an hour if you walked it, and it was only a half a mile. But I said, when we got to that little village, this man had a stack of World Evangelists, and they were so much like a treasure to him. He was proud of those. But Brother Overton's paper made it all the way to Africa, the English-speaking parts of Africa where there were a lot that could speak English. They begged for the World Evangelists, and Brother Overton would always find a way to send them bundles of the paper. And so the World Evangelist was eventually started. Now, I'm going to move on to why this paper. I want to read that. When do we stop?
About a quarter till.
About a quarter till. Okay, so we've got time then. Okay, I wanted to read this because this was, Charles Cole wrote this because he was the one that came up with the idea, we need to get Basil Overton here and start a paper that will, advertise for the school, but it will print articles that are in line with what we're trying to do. In other words, Brother Overton, they already knew where Brother Overton stood on his preaching and things, and that was exactly the way we wanted the school to be. And so I'm going to read this. Please indulge me on this. For many years, the undersigned have felt the need for the paper you now hold in your hand. We still feel the same need, and our reasons are as follows. First, we believe a paper is needed that will stress evangelism both at home and abroad. Secondly, we believe such a paper ought to provide practical help for evangelists in their labors in the pulpit or from house to house. Thirdly, we have longed for a paper that would emphasize the second half of the great, that's supposed to be Great Commission. I don't know what happened to, but it's supposed to be the Great Commission. Okay, I believe that looks like a repeat. We have longed for a paper that would emphasize, that it's part of it is, half of the Great Commission and keep the evangelized evangelizing. In other words, those that are already converted, converting others. Fourthly, we want to see a large paper offering more material and utilizing the gifts of many unused young evangelists. Fifthly, we desire a paper that will be interesting and helpful to all men and of good heart, whether saved or lost. In the sixth place, we want a paper that will stress doctrinal soundness and counteract the evils of liberalism and complacency in the church with evangelistic fervor. When we sought for the editor, now Brother Cole went on to explain how they went after Brother Overton to come. When we sought for the editor of such paper, the choice was so obvious that only one man was ever seriously considered. We knew a man of wide experience and demonstrated ability as a writer, preacher, debater, evangelist, and editor. We knew that through his experience he would have demonstrated the kindliness and light-hearted good humor of the master he served. Our only serious question was whether he would come. We urged Basil Overton to come to this work, or come for this work, with the simplicity of faith that characterized great men. He came. A brother in Memphis said, Basil Overton moves with grace and ease among the intellectuals and our generation, and yet retains contact with the ordinary man because he is a true child of the faith. We know this brief commendation will see the light of print only over his protest. In other words, Brother Overton, they did this without asking Brother Overton if they could do it, what they've just said. Because Brother Overton was a very modest person. He didn't go around bragging about everything that he could do and what he could do, but his light shined. We know this brief commendation will see the light of print only over his protest. We commend you to the editor of the World Evangelist, a disciple of Jesus and one who loves all his fellow men. And this was signed by Charles Coyle, Allen Brown, Albert Hill, and Rodney Tate. Now, every one of these men that signed that are now, I think, didn't Allen Brown pass away here several years ago? And I know that Albert Hill and Rod Tate and Brother Coyle did. So all of them are gone now. And this was published in the very first issue of the World Evangelist. Now then, let's see here. Okay, there's Brother Overton holding, I believe this is the last issue of the paper. I wish I had one of him holding the first issue, but I guess we didn't get that one. But Brother Overton was proud of that paper, and we all were too. We couldn't wait for the next issue to come out. This is telling his subscription when it started out. The rates were $3 for 1 year, $5 for 2, and foreign subscriptions $3.50 1 year and $6 for 2. So that was put in there to let people know how much they'd have to pay. And then, as I said, Brother Overton loved to have different divisions in the paper, and it was always, that section would always be there with a different article, obviously, and a lot of times from different people. I chose this one here because this was Brother Overton's outline, 3 wise men. And he put it in there so that young men and older men that was just beginning to preach would be able, and I don't know, I still have that, so they would be able to come up with an outline of their own, or use this as a guide, or even use this one. So he always wanted a sermon outline in there. And as I said, he always promoted mission work. This was Brother Jerry Davidson when he and Alta were working in the Ivory Coast. Jerry later came and worked with us and some of their friends that they were working with in Ivory Coast. And then I told you, Gems from Greek. He always loved that. And then some sharp saws. That's what it was. And these are sayings. And I love that bottom one. When both speaker and the audience are confused, the speech is profound. And Brother Overton, I don't know where he came up with all this, but he would have a section like that every time. And then, as I said, true to promise, the school was supported. He advertised the events at the school and advertised the very first workshop that we had there. Actually, when we started, we were having one in the spring and one in the fall. And then Oklahoma Christian approached us and asked if they could have one. And we said, well, you can have the one in the spring and we'll keep the one in the fall. And so we worked that out. And then mule musings and other matters. And Then the World Evangelist encouraged our youth. This was unto the young men. As I said, Barry Anderson did that. And this particular advertisement here was Farrell K. Hill. That was Farrell Kirby Hill. That was Brother A.R. Hill's wife. And then here is one, Sister Wilma Huffaker wrote one, Woman to Woman. And so he tried to have something in that paper for everyone, something of quality. And it wasn't just a filler. And then later, the Wayne Kilpatrick that some of you knew personally that came from Birmingham, he had I don't know, for a few years, he had a section in there called Illustrations That Illustrate. Now, most of those in the early days were done by him. And then here's Brother Curtis Maynard's. I was telling you, Brother Overton always wanted things to challenge people's minds. And so here is the Bible manhunt here. And then Appeal to Children. He always had a section called the Children's Column. And in this case, this was Connie Rhodes was the one who did this, and she did it for a while. Different people through the years did this. This was, I imagine this idea was sort of born from the Gospel Advocate in its early days, early 1900s. T.B. Larimer's second wife, Emma Page Larimore, had a section called Children's Corner. And people up to 20 years old were writing Sister Emma for advice, or, to let her know that they were going to church. Little kids, it was interesting to read the little letters that they'd write. And she would always respond something to each one of those letters that was published. And so this was along the same lines. And then he encouraged the home, Home Sweet Home, What is a Father? That was the title of that particular lesson that followed the heading here. And then two kinds of music. He loved poetry. And I do want to read this. Let me get my reading glasses here because, I could stand and read it over there, but you'd be looking at the backside like the bass player is always looking at the backside of the rest of the band, He's always stuck in the back. Okay. Quietly, the cautious creeping cat crept closely to where a winged morsel sat, where it felt no paw could venture. When the featherly meal was finished, and the music of the forest diminished, the mewing beast backed to his nest of rest. He washed his powder puff creepers. He slowly closed his watchful peepers, and entered the land of feline dreams. And as he dreamed of another feast on the wing, he wist not of him as a fiddle string would later make a music sweeter than that of the tweeter. For soon a canine prowler severely chased the cat that couldn't make enough haste, whose innards wound up as the fiddle makers. And when you've adroitly devoured another, whether enemy, friend, or brother, be concerned for your own destiny. So the moral to that story was the cat ate the bird that made the music, not dreaming that part of him would be making music later as a fiddle string. Years ago, fiddle strings and even the skin that was on a banjo head was used. They used a cat skin sometimes because it was real. When it dried out, it didn't break like others. And so Brother Overton demonstrated his ability as a poet and as his humor too. And that was Basil Overton. Okay, and then this sad note was published after Brother Overton had become so ill that he wasn't able to do this. Now, Brother Kippy Myers helped him in the last year and a half, I suppose, published a paper. When Brother Overton was not feeling well, Kippy took over and did it and made sure that it was published. But finally, the board over the World Evangelist had discussed with Brother Overton, and he decided that he needed to end the paper. So that was it. And then the appreciation dinner followed because at that time he officially was retiring from school too. I want to leave you with one saying that Brother Basil Overton always loved to tell us. He would say, "Boys, I love what I'm doing because I don't know what I'm doing." And by that, most of you understand what he was saying. We do not know the end results of the work we have done. Only God knows where it's leading. But we can look back now, since the school started in 1972 officially as International Bible College. We've got hundreds and hundreds of graduates. Steve Worley, you know Steve. Steve Worley has spent over 40 years in mission work with the Muslim section of Nigeria. Got a school there and has converted tons and tons of those people. And he's only one. That's the way Brother Laremore's school was. That book you mentioned I had written about J.R. Bradley, he was my great-great-uncle. He established 21 congregations, and hardly anybody knew him. What about all those other guys that nobody knew about? What the work they did? That's what Brother Overton meant. We don't know what we're doing. So that was Basil Overton. Thank you for letting me be in here.